Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey guys, welcome. We're just about to get started in about 30 seconds. All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the webinar, How to Create an Exceptional Digital Catalog. My name is Mandy Movahed, and I'm Director of Marketing here at Handshake. I've been lucky to work with manufacturers and distributors for just about 4 years now on optimizing their selling process, and a lot of that starts with setting up a great digital catalog. I'm excited to share a lot of the tips and the best practices that I've learned along the way. This webinar is going to have something for you regardless of where you're at in the process. So for those of you who are just now transitioning from paper to a digital catalog, we'll have a lot of great tips and best practices for you to do that initial setup. For those of you who have already transitioned, congrats. We'll be covering how to optimize your current catalog to increase sales in person and online. And even if you're doing everything perfectly, which of course I'm suspicious of, we'll be covering how to optimize what your actual efforts are now. And we'll talk about some suggestions as to how you can get even more from your current catalog. My portion of the webinar is going to be about 30 minutes. So after that, we'll open up the floor to your questions. So if anything comes up for you during the webinar, I would like to ask that you please input them into the GoToWebinar chat box. It makes it a little bit easier for me at the end to be able to field those if they're already there. So let's get started. So what are we going to cover today? So first, we're going to cover what the B2B digital catalog actually is and the reason manufacturers and distributors see success using it. And I'll share a little bit on adoption here as well. Next up, we'll talk about how to determine your catalog structure, because this is something that changes based on the needs of your business. It may seem obvious at first, but this is a place where you really want to be thoughtful, and we'll get into more of this later. In the Understanding Your Content Needs section, we're going to cover all the best practices on product photography and messaging, what you should and shouldn't be doing in your catalog. Branding will be next. This is about reinforcing the work you've done on the catalog with customization and product marketing collateral. The next section is really important because at the end of the day, this is probably the strongest differentiator between a B2B and B2C catalog, and that's personalization. I'll be sharing some things you need to do to make sure your catalog is specific to your buyer. At the end, I'll be giving you some ideas for next steps based on where you're at in this process. And from there, as I mentioned, we're going to get into your questions. All right, let's get started. So before we go too far, I just want to set the stage a little for our conversation today. So what exactly is the digital B2B catalog? At a very high level, the digital catalog is the much cooler cousin of the paper catalog, which, as you guys know, often resembles a telephone book. It's your brand's entire product line in a digital format on a mobile device or on your website. It usually has images, product descriptions, and sometimes pricing. It's the best way to unify and centralize all of your product data in one place. It's also really critical because it's the source of truth for your customer, giving them a place to find self-serve answers to simple questions that had to be answered in the past by your reps or customer service team. And this is something I often see as a big differentiator between that paper and digital catalog, in that it's really hard to provide the source of truth in a paper catalog for your customers because oftentimes the customer has to actually cross-reference a price sheet that's specific to them. So it's really hard to get all of that very personal information into one central place, and it creates kind of a disjointed user experience for the buyer. So what else is the digital catalog besides being personalized? So actually, sorry, I got a little thrown off because I went on my little tangent. So on the personalized front, just to be clear here, your digital catalog should be a personalized browsing experience for your reps or for your customers. They should have access to, maybe specific products that you want them to see or not see. They should have their specific pricing, whether they're, gold, silver, bronze tier customer. And we'll talk much more about this in a bit. So it's also accurate. One of the biggest disadvantages of paper catalog is, given the nature of most businesses, pricing, imagery, descriptions, availability, these things are evolving, sometimes even on a daily basis. So usually by the time a physical catalog is printed, it's already obsolete. And this is actually a little different than what we talked about before. There's no point in even including specific pricing in a paper catalog, but the rest of this content, which is actually specific to the buyer, you just can't keep up with some of the changes that might be occurring in your business on the paper end. So the great thing about a digital catalog can be that changes are instantly propagated out to your users, whether that's to your reps in the field, on a mobile device, or a buyer in your B2B e-commerce portal. And that means you can feel assured that when your reps or your customers are reviewing the catalog, that the information is definitely correct. It's real time. Because these changes are updated immediately, you can feel confident that the accuracy we just talked about will be there all the time. And this is especially important when we talk about inventory levels of products, where knowing what's in or out of stock is really critical to preventing back orders or simply managing your customers' expectations. So how about search? The catalog needs to be highly searchable. So think about this. People browse in different ways. You need to make sure that someone can find what they're looking for, not only by using the navigation to maybe select the right category of products as they browse, but it's also important that your products have the right keywords or attributes associated with them to let the customer search directly for a red lamp, for example. And finally, a catalog by nature is highly visual. It's a place where the customer can view multiple high-definition, zoomable images of your products. It's also a great place to include lifestyle imagery or other visual elements like merchandising guides or product videos. Ideally, after viewing your digital catalog, any questions that your customer had should have been answered. So a few quick stats here. We did a survey of over 400 wholesale distributors and manufacturers across all different industries. And we found that 60% of manufacturers and distributors have already digitized their catalog in some shape or form. So when we asked about the information they'd most like their sales reps to carry into customer meetings, digital catalogs came out on top, with 74% of respondents wanting their reps to have access to them. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about why digital catalogs are important and widely used in manufacturing and distribution, let's move to some of the details. So first up, we're going to talk about how to determine your catalog structure. So for those of you who have not done your catalog setup yet, and even for brands that have, but it could be better, it's important to think about the best way to organize your products for catalog navigation or quickly pulling up an individual SKU. So particularly for digital catalogs that are on mobile devices where browsing is driven by your sales rep, it's very critical to optimize the catalog navigation for the way your reps sell. And to be honest, while this is relevant for the sales rep piece, if your sales reps are going to be the one browsing the catalog with your customer, it's also the case that most of the time, the way your reps sell and the way you might want your customer to browse online is similar. So the way you would set up the catalog is similar. There are some scenarios where you might have a different desired user flow for the browsing, especially if you're trying to push complementary products or things of that nature. But for the most part, it's really important to think just really, how does your business sell? So there are a number of ways typically we see this happening. The first is seasonally. So you might be selling seasonal collections or products that are only available at certain times of the year. So in this case, it would make sense to organize your products by season. And this also makes selling like pre-season a little bit more straightforward as well. So you also might want to sell by brand or line. And we see this especially important with our distributor customers, so people who are representing multiple brands or selling these distinct product lines. Product category is what you see most traditionally in B2C e-commerce platforms. And this is fairly common also in B2B for people who are single line manufacturers or distributors. And in this scenario, typically, if you're selling by product category, again, the navigation is going to be driven by category type rather than the brand name itself. So let's talk a little bit about catalog organization. So the best way to think about the way your catalog will be organized is to think of the actual category tree of your products. So you can see here that this is a outdoor products manufacturer. We happen to work with a lot of them at Handshake. So they took the third approach that we just talked about in the last slide. So by product category, they obviously have organized their catalog by products that fall under these umbrella categories of camp, cycle, or snow. One risk I wanted to point out here is that we sometimes see is over-categorization, which typically is brought out with good intentions and trying to organize this information in a very granular way, or trying to represent a very massive product line in a granular way. But if you think about it this way, and if you think about your own consumer browsing experience when you're buying online, you don't want your stakeholders on the front line, so whether that's your reps and especially your customers, tapping 10 times before they find the product that they want. I had an experience like this recently where I had to click like 5 buttons to get to like a particular shoe that I was looking for, and I felt like I would rather have had 2 clicks and been able to do a visual scroll. So it's just an annoying user experience to have your customers tapping that many times. So this all has to do with the way you actually organize your product in your category tree. And the way to really determine whether you're kind of a victim of the category or the over-categorization is if you're finding yourself with some product categories that only contain maybe 1 or 2 products, you probably over-categorized. So this brings us to the power of search and searchability. You want to solve that problem with finding the right product, not with over-categorization, but with very user-friendly search. Search is a no-brainer. Some people are going to prefer to scroll and tap through your line, and other people just want a direct shot to what they want. You need to have your reps have the ability, the reps and the customers to have the ability to search by SKU or product name. Those are more traditional ways of searching products. They're a little bit basic, but what's most important actually is something called faceted search, which is a much more exceptional search experience, and it's what we're used to on the B2C end, where you, and I think a lot of us probably don't think about what goes into this. Obviously, given my role here, I think about it a lot more. But, I always judge an e-commerce provider or site based on how great their faceted search is. And so if I'm looking for a particular item, maybe like just the other day, I was helping a friend look for wedding dresses, and I wanted to just search for white dresses. And the ability to just to search white and dress as a faceted keyword in a search bar and have all the items return because that vendor has properly tagged all of their products with white and dress is a really important search usability thing. So it's something that you need to think about, both does the provider of your digital catalog software allow you to do that? And how are you going to go about pulling that together on your end? Because it does actually require you to do a little bit of work on that end. Finally, just a little bit on product organization. This is something that's important in B2B. So in many industries, in manufacturing and distribution, a product will come in multiple sizes or colors or materials. And one thing that differentiates the B2B catalog from a B2C catalog is that typically on the B2C side, a consumer is only going to buy one color or one size of a product unless they are living a truly wonderful life and are buying 5 colors of the same thing. On the B2B side, the buyer is likely buying across a range of sizes and colors at volume. So, for example, if you're on Amazon.com, you view a product, you select one size and a color at a time, and you're adding those products to your cart. And this is not ideal if you're buying across the size range. So you need to make sure that your digital catalog is displaying products, for example, in a grid view, that allows you to more neatly package variants of the same SKU. Sorry about that. There's an example of it. All right, cool. So understanding content needs. So we're going to go now on to what some of you might be here for, especially those of you who might be a little bit earlier on your business or smaller companies. Understanding your content needs. So this is, especially if you have not set up a digital catalog before, these are some best practices for product imagery and messaging. Even if you do have a functioning digital catalog, I think that there are some great takeaways for people even in later stages of their business or have been using a catalog for a while, just because there are a lot of kind of general marketing messaging best practices that you should make sure you're adhering to in order to provide the best possible buyer experience for your customers. So the first tip on the images front, and this one should probably be obvious, but make sure you're using high resolution photos that are always in focus. So this is important not only because the pixelated or blurry photos look unprofessional, but if you happen to be selling products that are nuanced or highly detailed, a low quality photo will make it very difficult for your customers to confirm it's exactly what they're looking for. So this example I like because it shows a more on a functional level why multiple product views can be necessary. So obviously you can see here that without this additional view, the buyer wouldn't know about the back detail on this top. And this obviously will resonate with most of you on the B2C side. Like a retailer cannot get away with providing one image that doesn't show something is completely open in the back, for example, without the customer being angry. But it's also the case that your B2B customers are accustomed to viewing these things in their consumer life. And they want the same experience that when they're buying in their store. Or for their store. So this investment in kind of excellent multi-angle product images can also reduce any costs that you have associated with carrying product samples by your sales reps. So we see this actually, we work with a meat distributor who has had a lot of luck with using very visual imagery of their like high-end meat samples, which they used to spend up to $10 on each. And now they're able to use the digital catalog to provide a very visual experience for the buyer without having to bring that or waste that money. So demonstrating scale. So an alternate image that you should be including in your catalog, depending on what types of products you sell. And this is something that B2C does really well. You just want to make sure that your buyer has a point of reference to estimate the size of a product. So this is a very obvious example where a round vase can really be any size, and having the hand there makes all the difference. So a few quick tips on demonstrating scale. So as we saw on the last slide, the most traditional route to show scale is having a model hold the product. You can also position the product next to like a small everyday object in the image, and it's ideal to give context by picking something that's somewhat associated. So for example, if you're selling a purse, you can set it next to a cell phone or a set of keys, just to kind of make that make sense. Also, just know that this kind of scale image should be one of your alternate images rather than the primary image associated with the product. So you want the kind of, that first image should be like the star where the product is highlighted in its best light. And then this could be something near the end of that image carriage. Next up is contextual images. So contextual images are also sometimes referred to as lifestyle images, and these are more realistic portrayals of your product. So they're either worn by a real person, like in the sunglasses example, or maybe a product being used or stationed in a more natural environment. So again, what I just mentioned about these scale images also applies to contextual images. These should be listed at the end of the carousel. You know, typically buyers get a lot more of what they need with that traditional imagery, and these are just kind of nice to have images that provide that additional context, but should not be listed first. So on the cropping front, it's important to keep cropping consistent. And one big point here that you should take away is on scannability. So the human eye has a really remarkable ability to quickly scan consistently sized images, and it's very much an interruption if they have to kind of jump from images that are being scanned in different ways. It just doesn't allow them to consume the information in the way you'd like them to. So that consistency with orientation and cropping, it's really the best way for the buyer to get a lot of info out of your catalog very quickly. This one should be very straightforward to you, I hope, but don't get too creative with your backdrops of your photos. Less is more here. You want to make sure that the focus is really on the product that you're selling. Great. So now that we've covered some of those imagery-related best practices, now let's move to messaging, something that I love. So just like in the product imagery example we just talked about, you want to help people extract key information from your product descriptions as quickly as they can. And so what does that look like? So partially it's about being concise while covering what's necessary. And that's usually answering questions about your products that your customers typically have. After a very quick scan of a product description, they should actually be able to understand what you have to offer. This is something that is a very obvious best practice I hope for you, but try to avoid large blocks of text. It's just too long, but also it's not readable. So think about it. If you think about it this way, if you're writing an important business email to someone, you would probably separate key thoughts into paragraphs or hopefully use bullets to provide a little bit more of a readable email. You might also bold certain text to really highlight the most important content. So just think about that with your product descriptions. Like, no one wants to read a novel when they're trying to understand what your product is. This last one's important. You need to maintain a consistent structure. So don't think about these product descriptions as, some literary masterpiece. In fact, you're really doing yourself a disservice. Even if you're writing something you think is cute, it's much more important that you divide up the content into the same number of sections, that you're using the same number of feature bullets, but also that you're actually being consistent about the way you talk about your product. So for example, if in one description you include a story of where the product was sourced and the way it should be used, make sure that both of these components are used each time, because when your buyer goes to the next product, for example, they'll be able to quickly scan and find the information they're looking for based on that consistent pattern that you've actually set up. So branding. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on the branding subject, but I just want to share a few things that you could be doing, particularly once you have your catalog basics in place. We've talked about how important it is for the catalog to serve as the source of truth for your customers, and that's really critical. You have to make sure that your pricing and your product information is always updated. And once you built that trust with your customer base, that's when they'll be returning repeatedly to the catalog, and that is when the branding opportunity and the marketing opportunity really comes into play. And again, if you do not have that core data in place, you'll never be able to leverage the marketing opportunity, because your customers will not come back to your digital catalog because they won't trust it. They'll just go directly to you. They'll call you directly. They'll ask for whatever you used to give them, because at least they can trust that it might be right. So first up on the branding front, your catalog should ideally represent the look and the feel of your brand. So that includes making sure the catalog reflects your brand colors, has the right logos in the right places. We see that branding of the catalog is important for most companies, but especially those in more design-oriented fields like fashion or sporting goods or paper goods, stationery companies. For these brands, it's not only important for them to have a consistent brand identity, but they also want a very polished and modern aesthetic. So working with a vendor that can really provide something more modern is important to them. Next up is lifestyle imagery. So we talked a little bit about this when we went over contextual images, but we see a lot of manufacturers and distributors find it useful to give access to their lookbook or other high-quality lifestyle imagery along with the rest of the digital catalog. So this can take shape in different ways. You might just want to include that as a contextual image in each of your product, the product detail view, or it might be a downloadable PDF that your buyers can access. I've also seen this, actually, one of our customers provides their lookbook alongside their login for their online ordering portal. So as kind of like a lead generating tactic. So even for customers that haven't yet placed orders with them, their first access point is going to be, oh, look, here's our online or B2B e-commerce portal. Request access to the portal. In the meantime, feel free to download our lookbook here. And I found that to be like a great branded experience. So the last thing here is product education and merchandising information. And this is also something that's kind of similar to the lifestyle or like the lookbook PDF that I just mentioned. It's other collateral that can enhance the education of the product education. So that could be demo videos. It can be merchandising guides. These are all things that are adding additional brand value on top of the catalog. And one thing that's important is that you should ensure that your catalog solution has the capability to store this type of content somewhere. They should have, some kind of aggregated hub in addition to the typical catalog view that allows your buyers or your customers to be able to access this type of enhanced information. So now we're going to move to what I mentioned earlier as the biggest differentiator of the B2B catalog, and that's personalization. So B2B selling, as you all know, because you're in manufacturing and distribution, it's all about personalized selling. So you really want to mimic the same experience that your buyers have received in the face-to-face interactions that they've had with their sales rep. So this means that you are ensuring you're displaying the right assortment of products to them. It means that they're definitely viewing the pricing that they have access to. It might mean that you're giving them promotional, like customer-specific promotion access. It's just really important, as I mentioned before, that your customer is able to do this in your digital catalog without having to cross-reference with another spreadsheet. So let's just talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. So customer-specific product assortments, that's ensuring the customer sees only the products that they're eligible to purchase. This keeps them focused on the relevant products and clears out the rest of that distracting noise. Obviously, another downside of, or outside of just providing noise that might distract them from purchasing what you want them to purchase, we've also had examples where, the distributor or manufacturer doesn't want, they literally cannot service a particular customer with certain products, and they don't want to actually give them, if they give them access in the catalog and then all of a sudden have to say, sorry, we can't actually provide those to you. It's just not a great user experience. Customer-specific pricing, that's huge. It's probably the most widely used feature of B2B catalogs. So let's say you have different pricing tiers for your gold, silver, and bronze customers. This is always going to be reflected in your catalog, so the customer's always looking at what's accurate for them. And then finally, this is something that's actually a more sophisticated feature that you should try to look for when you're looking at building your digital catalog. It's about access to order history or products that your buyers most frequently order. So this is something that's very relevant for reps or customers placing orders from the digital catalog. So for anyone who's you have that order writing feature or capability on top of your catalog. And this allows people to do things like duplicate a past order, which is a great user experience for the buyer. And also it also can drive upsells or cross-sells, and just by giving access to the previously ordered items, it just gives a lot more context for the order to be placed. Another quick thing on the personalization of the catalog front on the sales rep end. So if you have reps that are selling in particular territories or are only selling certain manufacturers or certain brands or lines, you can control the version of the catalog that they have access to. So it makes it a lot more simple for the kind of the rep to be there and just providing access to exactly what the customer has access to without having to worry about it all on their end. All right, great. So we are at the next steps portion. So I'm going to leave you with a few takeaways before we get to Q&A. For those of you who have not gone digital yet, you need to figure out what your catalog strategy is. And that means some careful planning and implementation of all of the things we actually talked about today. You guys are, you have the biggest opportunity, and you have the biggest opportunity to do things right, which is kind of exciting. So the other thing to mention here is there are a lot of technologies that you can layer on top of your digital catalog to actually drive revenue. So it's actually the case that a lot of manufacturers and distributors who are setting up a digital catalog for the first time just end up doing these both in one shot. It's a pretty obvious opinion of mine, given my bias that I work at a software company that provides ordering software, but I just don't see the digital catalog as a static document doing anything for your business. It should be a revenue driver, and it should have ordering capacity on top of it. So I just don't think it makes sense for you to put all this effort into creating the digital catalog if you can't make money on it. So just a few of these technologies that people layer on top. One is mobile order writing software, and that's what reps use in the field. So typically it's a rep selling from the digital catalog on a smartphone or a tablet and writing orders with your customers in person that then sync back to your headquarters. B2B e-commerce software, obviously there's massive adoption going on of B2B e-commerce right now. It's actually table stakes for most manufacturers and distributors at this point. So this gives your customers that self-serve opportunity to place orders from your catalog. Just to put some real numbers on this, by the way, we recently did a survey that showed about 44% of respondents already have a B2B e-commerce portal in place. And 50% of that remaining group are planning to put something in place over the next year. So on the mobile commerce front, this is the newest of the three, and something we see a lot of manufacturers and distributors investing in now, particularly in food and beverage and some industries that really rely on the shelf side ordering workflow. And in this case, it's a B2B e-commerce portal for your customers, but on a mobile app. So it's pretty awesome. It allows your customers to kind of barcode scan and just really place an order very easily next to the shelf or wherever they'd like to on a mobile device. And it also works offline. So that's pretty much on the next steps front. Oh, sorry, no, well, what am I thinking? I need to address you people that have everything in place, which I'm very proud of you. So yeah, if you have your digital catalog in place and you have all the technology in place, I mean, this is obvious. You need to monitor your current operation. So, let's, for example, look at adoption of your platform. So let's say you have a digital catalog, but you don't see orders coming in. Maybe your data is inaccurate. Maybe it's not updated. Maybe you haven't done a great job advocating during your rollout strategy, or you need to make a more personalized marketing strategy. So whatever that is, just continue to optimize and push for better results because you have a huge tailwind driving this change forward. You've already come so far, particularly in your competitive landscape. All right, so we are going to get into your questions now. I do see some Handshake specific questions coming in. I just wanted to mention that typically on these webinars, we usually provide the opportunity to see a demo of Handshake and receive kind of a discounted offer for being a webinar attendee. Just to give you some quick context on Handshake's solution, just so this makes a little sense to you in terms of how this ties into the digital catalog. Handshake has a few categories of software. We have a B2B commerce platform that has this mobile order writing application for reps in the field, and it has a B2B e-commerce solution both on web and mobile for your customers. Included in that entire product experience is also the setup of your digital catalog. So really allowing you to drive a lot of revenue out of the digital catalog setup. So if you are interested in speaking to someone here, learning a little bit more about the product, sharing a little bit more about your current efforts and how we might be able to help, just type demo into the question box, and I will make sure that whoever reaches out to you knows that you're eligible for that promotion as well. Okay. All right, so I'm just checking out the questions that are coming in, and thanks for the demo request. Take a few more of those. Okay, the first question is, will a recording be sent out to attendees? Yes, there will be a recording sent out to attendees. So within the next 24 hours or so, we'll get you this recording as well as a copy of the slides. Okay, this question says, you talked about versioned catalogs for different reps/buyers. How would you explain versioned catalogs? Any real life experiences? Okay, I'm not sure I completely understand the question. I believe you mean versioned as in just different iterations of the same catalog or personalized versions of the catalog. In terms of how I would explain them, it's kind of what I've already mentioned in the webinar. Maybe it's not sufficient, and we can definitely connect offline if that's not the case. But this is a completely personalized, gated experience for your buyers. So the buyer logs in, they're able to see the products, promotions, pricing that is available to them. In terms of my real life experiences, pretty much every single customer I work with at Handshake over the last 4 years has quote unquote versioned catalogs or a tailored catalog for their buyers. It's the reason they work with us. It's the ordering use case, it's the ordering workflow in manufacturing and distribution. We would not exist if we didn't create a product that allowed you to do this for different buyers. That's just how you guys do business. One of the companies that we advise already has an inventory management system, I believe this person's saying. How easy/hard is it to integrate Handshake to existing inventory management systems? Thanks for that question. So there's a few answers on this front. We do have companies that work with inventory management systems that have integrated the system, and we have a professional services team that handles our integration needs. So I think the best thing for us to do, Guillermo, is to actually connect to make sure which system you're referring to. We've done a lot of integrations, so it's not hard at all. I would also mention, though, that a lot of people find that the inventory management type features that Handshake offers are sufficient for their needs. So we actually provide the ability for manufacturers and distributors to show inventory levels of their products to both their sales reps and customers while they're browsing or buying, which is handled in different ways. So for people who have maybe a less sophisticated or less technical integration, they just upload a spreadsheet with their inventory information that automatically updates and gets populated out to their respective stakeholders in the business. And others have a more real-time API integration that allows for kind of real-time inventory availability for the seller and buyer. So a lot of our Handshake customers utilize that feature and don't and find that to be sufficient. But as I mentioned, happy to put you in touch with someone to talk to you about inventory management integration. Do you have any products for small/micro distributors? So we work with businesses of all sizes, from small to enterprise. Our product is the same for both. There is no difference between Handshake for a small distributor or not. I would say that we do work with a lot of distributors, period, and our ability to represent a multi-line catalog is the reason a lot of people come to us. So we should be set there. Anthony is asking, from my experience, can I recommend some companies/brands that have a good digital catalog? A catalog that seems to be in tune to the points that you have gone over today. Sure, Anthony. I will send you along some examples. The thing about B2B digital catalogs is that they are gated most of the time. So what I mean by gated is they are kind of login locked. So let me get you some examples and I'll send them along. What are some of the best, okay, this is a question from Derek. What are the best methods to increase traffic of current customers to your website that are stuck with ordering the same old way they always have? Thanks for that question. This is something I have a lot of experience in, both as a marketer in general, trying to get people to do things I want them to do. And I've written a lot of the B2B commerce adoption content at Handshake. So there are a lot of methods. And Derek, I will send you, we have a number of assets we've created on this topic that will be much more substantial. For anyone else who wants them as well, please just type in adoption and I'll have someone send you the adoption guides we've created. But so the top ways to drive more traffic to your website are, one, via your sales reps. So the number one way that it might sound kind of funny that your in-person channel would actually drive more online ordering, but the truth is, if your sales reps are champions of your online ordering portal, and that takes you really getting them on board and commissioning them on online orders that are coming through, they are the ones that are going to sing praises of your portal. They have the relationship with your customers, and they're going to get people to place orders online. So similar, kind of a closely related point here, which is not necessarily the rep all the time, but it could be your customer service team. We've seen customers of ours have a lot of success verbally enforcing use of the online ordering portal after they take an order over the phone, for example. So I spoke with a customer the other day who was telling me how, she'll take an order over the phone or email, and she'll just respond by saying, sure, I'm happy to do this for you this time, but make sure to place your reorder online. And she's found that to be effective. The other big category of driving usage and online ordering is email marketing. Email marketing is a very effective tool to get people to do anything you need them to do. And typically it requires a series of emails that is referred to as a drip email sequence or a drip email campaign. And the best drip campaigns have an educational element that kind of explains something you're going to roll out and why it benefits the target audience, and then gives access information to your buyers, of course, has follow-up, has promotions. So these are the primary ways to drive your buyer to do something different than they always have. Before we move on, the one other thing I'll mention is you can include like a cardstock flyer or mailer in all of your actual physical product shipments that say, place your reorder online. We found people have success with that approach as well. Let's see here. Is sales rep commission being calculated in the platform? I believe this is a question on Handshake specific capabilities. I think I have actually heard of some customers creating like custom reports or custom functionality in order to do that. Right now, Handshake is being, our platform functionality in general is being heavily built up, which would allow for something called custom objects, where you can bring any of this type of ancillary business reporting or intelligence into the app, such that you would be able to kind of do the sales rep calculation and manifest that to the sales rep itself. However, I don't believe it's a default Handshake feature, but I don't think it's something that's not achievable. Oh, sorry. Okay. We are a small business doing about $2 million in sales, but growing. We are 95% B2B, but are implementing a direct-to-consumer part of the business. It sounds like we would need to run two separate platforms. Is that right? Wayne, that is right. I've seen just a ton of horror stories of people who try to force their B2C solution to work for their B2B business, and I could talk for 5 hours about this topic, but I'll try to distill it. Particularly because you are doing 95% of your business on the B2B side, you really need to optimize. You have to have a solution that's optimized for B2B ordering. So if you run a system that is meant for B2C ordering or direct-to-consumer business, as you phrased it, it's pretty much optimized around a one product purchase. It's getting people to click buy now. It's about trying to prevent credit card drop off, or cart abandonment, and trying to get people to put their credit card details in without dropping off. It's just a lot of things that are not relevant in the B2B world. So for your B2B business, you've been working with these people for many years. You have all of their information. They might be paying on net payment terms. There are just things in your B2B portal that need to be functioning that do not exist in the B2C portal. And not to mention a lot of very specific promotional support and, very specific pricing support, business rule support. We see a lot of people needing things like order minimums per customer, or special promotions like buy one, the BOGO promotions. It's just not something you can achieve in a B2C solution. And we have seen people who try to do that, which is called Frankensteining. Forcing a B2C solution to work for your B2B needs, really actually become very frustrated and end up going the B2B route eventually. Hope that helps. Okay, looks like those are all the questions. So as I mentioned, anyone who wants a demo, just let us know right now. Anyone who wants adoption content, happy to send that along, so type that in. Let me give you my info. So we're all set. Here's my email if you want to be in touch and talk about anything related to the topic areas today. Feel free to check us out online, check out our blog. We do a lot of webinars, so we'd love to have you join. We have a few really exciting new ones coming out this quarter as well, so be on the lookout for that over email. The other thing I'll mention is we have a digital catalog guide that we've created that you guys will all be receiving in our follow-up email. So that will kind of encapsulate a lot of the topics we talked about today and give you some additional information as well. Thanks for being here, and it was great to have your engaging questions, and I hope you learned something today. Take care and have a good one.